Sometimes when you watch the combine, players just jump off the screen.
Mm,
Jihad Campbell just jumps off the
yeah.
screen. You have to pay attention to his numbers. You have to pay attention to his productivity. You have to be like, well, that looks like a Detroit Lion. From the facts that you see on film, I just think that he definitely stood out from the linebacking crew. Who else stood out? Who made a case for themselves from the linebacking crew at the combine?
Yeah, so it was interesting because Carson Schlesinger, he did the vertical, but he didn't compete in the on-field drills, and his vertical was 39.5. Like, he's an explosive player. You go look at his numbers. He's 100 tackle seasons just stacked. I mean, he had an excellent career at UCLA. One guy that really stood out to me, and he's an interesting prospect. I mean, you mentioned Campbell. I think he set himself apart. But one guy that really stood out to me was Oklahoma State's Nick Martin. Just watching him, you're impressed by his athletic ability, 4.53 in the 40, 38-inch vertical, like the traits are there. And so I did a little bit of digging on him, and he had a knee injury that limited him to 5 games this year, but he was coming off a 100 plus tackle season in 2023 for Oklahoma State. And then he had 10 tackles and 16 tackles in his first 2 games, including 4.5 tackles for loss against Arkansas in the second game of the year for Oklahoma State. And I'm impressed by the fact that he suffered a significant injury. And instead of just kind of resting on his laurels and saying, hey, I'll work out at the pro day, like here's a guy that's not super far removed from an injury that cost him over half the season who decided to come out and do all these workouts at the combine. So I think there's something to be said for that. I think he's a little bit further down the board, but on a day where Schlesinger doesn't do on-field drills, one of your top two linebacking prospects is out. Now all of a sudden that opens up the playing field, and guys like Nick Martin can go out and really put on a show. I mean, if Schlesinger would have worked out, I think you'd have seen a lot of heads turn after he worked out, and maybe not pay as much attention to guys further down the board. But because of that, guys like Nick Martin, guys like Teddy Buchanan out of Cal, who had a 40-inch vertical jump, like these younger outside prospects who are a little bit further down the board, I think got a chance to shine on Thursday night. And so I was really impressed with guys like Buchanan, guys like Martin. Kane Medrano, who was Schlesinger's teammate at UCLA, ran the fastest 40 of any linebacker at the combine. And then if you're talking about guys who have just been staples, Danny Stutzman, who could have been a mid-round pick last year coming out of Oklahoma, elected to stay. He had a really good showing. He just has the technique that you really like at the linebacker position. So I thought that it was kind of an open playing field after Jihad Campbell, and I think a lot of guys had claims that they really put out there as far as moving up the board. So that's a position group to keep an eye on, too, for the Lions after they cut Jalen Reeves-Maybin. Obviously, Malcolm Rodriguez, the significant knee injury on Thanksgiving, so who knows what his timeline looks like. So, yeah, their depth could be a need for the Lions at linebacker, and I think there's a lot of good options out there.